Hey everyone, Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. We are nestled in the kitchen today and we are going to be making another DIY tincture. So you guys know I put a huge emphasis on our herb medicinal garden this past summer, and I was very diligent about harvesting and drying so that I could have a bunch of medicinal herbs to make different things throughout the fall and winter. So one of the things that I grew a ton of, this was actually the second year, so I planted it last year, reaped a harvest, but it's Echinacea. So you can see here, there are these beautiful, vibrant petals that you can use for a lot of things. You have the leaves that you can use for things, and then you're supposed to wait until it is 3 years old to dig up and use the roots. So you'll find a lot of online recipes, or even if you read a lot of herbal books, that they really recommend using Echinacea root, and it has a lot of great properties, but everything I've read has advised to not do that until you have 3-year-old roots. So I have been saving these, using the petals for different things, and today we're going to make an Echinacea leaf tincture. So I'm actually going to take these dried Echinacea leaves, we're going to grind them down in a pestle and mortar, and we're going to make this immune boosting tincture. It's kind of my favorite time to stock up and make tinctures because usually they take about 4 to 6 weeks before you can use them, which means we would be getting into peak cold and flu season, which is when I want to combat against those just as naturally and holistically as I can. So if you are wanting to make this recipe with me, what you are going to need is Echinacea leaf. If you did not grow your own Echinacea, there's a lot of great places you can source this sustainably grown. You're also going to need some sort of high proof alcohol, whether that's a brandy, a rum. I usually always do vodka, just like a really high proof vodka, because we usually always have it on hand for stuff like this, and some sort of glass jar with a tight fitting lid. Once the process is done and we strain it in a few weeks, you will need some sort of strainer, and I like to store all my tinctures in just amber glass bottles. I'll go ahead and leave some links to those in the description below, but that isn't something that you need to have now because that'll be later once this has kind of set and all that goodness has started to take place, and we move on to straining the Echinacea out and bottling it up. But before we jump into the how-to, because it's so simple, right? You want to sit and store and let all of that infuse and work its magic, and so that part's actually going to be really quick, but I want to share with you guys the benefit of it, why you would want to make this Echinacea leaf tincture, how you would use it, and how I believe it's a tool you need in your little holistic herbal tool belt for later in the winter. So Echinacea is commonly grown and known for its immune boosting properties, specifically with cold and flu symptoms. One of the things I love about Echinacea is that it's so versatile. You can use it as a medicinal herb, and there's so many different things you can use with it, but you can also use it to attract pollinators for your cut flower garden. So it's one of those that you can just always grow and just use as you see fit, but it is one of those that I've loved growing because I've found that there's so much versatility for it. But it is known to alleviate and help combat against respiratory issues, specifically cold and flu. It's also known to have anti-inflammatory issues, which is great, especially if you think about if you have a sinus infection or a cold and flu. It's also going to just help bring down the inflammation in your body as well. So it's one of those 2-in-1, right? It's just got a lot of great stuff to it. So as far as when to take this tincture, there's a couple ways you could do it. You can use it as a preventative, much like you would elderberry. I know this time of year, I give my kids a shot of elderberry every day just to make sure their immune system's just really fighting on the front lines like it should as the weather starts to shift. And I probably use, elderberry more so as a preventative than I do when my children are actually sick. That's kind of how I am viewing this Echinacea leaf tincture. I'm wanting to use it to just kind of help build mine and my kids' immunity and just add that good immune support to combat against any illness that would have come on. And so just a dropper full is what I will do. It ends up being around 15-20 drops, but I'm actually just going to mix this with my coffee in the morning. You can mix it with water, with juice. You can add it into something, or you can just drop it directly underneath your tongue. And so you can do that every day as a immune support, or when you notice that you are feeling ill, you can go ahead and start adding that in, and you can take it multiple times when you are actually sick. Same with elderberry syrup. When you're actually sick, I'm taking elderberry syrup every few hours. It's the same with any sort of herbal remedy. remedy. So sometimes there's a lot of opinions that surface that holistic medicine doesn't work. And honestly, I just believe that that's not true. It's not that it doesn't work, but it is different than conventional medicine in the sense that you're going to have to do it more frequently and more often to see those results, because it's not, hey, take this pill and it's going to last 12 hours, right? It is a very natural thing, so you're going to have to do it more frequently. But the great thing is when you're doing a lot of natural holistic methods and remedies, you can never, it's hard to take too much of it, right? You're not going to take too much elderberry syrup. With this tincture, you can take it multiple times throughout the day to combat against that, especially if you are sick. Anytime I do these herbal videos, I always get asked about dosages. And the reason that I kind of steer clear from this is that I am not a medical professional, and I do not want to tell you to do something and it ends up being wrong, because there's so much information about it. Generally though, I like to give my kids tinctures and herbs that I know are safe. And so Echinacea is one of those that is safe for kids to consume. And so I'm really mindful of that. But there's so many different variables when it comes to dosaging for adults and for kids. The biggest thing being the age, the weight, and things like that. So anytime you're testing out something like this and you're unsure, it is just good practice to seek out medical advice, ask what that recommended thing is specifically for you or your child that you were treating. So for me personally with my kids, this is what I'm going to do with this tincture. June will get anywhere from a half a ml to 1 ml mixed in with her water. Charlie would be double that. Obviously, I am going to be taking more than that because my weight is vastly different than theirs. But that is one of those things, whether you are taking, holistic advice from me or anyone else on the internet, it is important to know your body, know your kid's body, seek out medical advice on this, which is something I've done. I've done a lot of research. I've talked with a lot of holistic practitioners to figure out what is that safe dosage for my kids based off of this specific herb. So I do recommend you guys do that as well. But Echinacea is a safe herb for kids and for children's use, so that's just something to be mindful of. I usually always dilute it for me and the kids because some of these tinctures are a bit strong, right? Just taking them by themselves might not taste super delightful. So if I can dilute it either in my coffee, my kids' water, I find that that works really well. So now that you guys know a little bit of Echinacea, some of its properties, it's a great immune boosting herb. It's so great to have in your tool belt. There's so many things, like I mentioned, you can do with the leaves, the flowers, and the root. Today we're going to be using the leaf of these, but let's get started and make our Echinacea leaf tincture. All right, so now let's calculate what we need of each part. Alcohol and Echinacea. We just use this 360 vodka. We can get them in these jugs and reuse them, but each person may need to make more or less depending on how often you plan on using it and how many people are in your family. So I kind of alter how much I make depending on the tincture it is and how often I think I'm going to use it. And so what you're going to do is just base everything off of a 1.5 ratio. So what that means, for every 1 part dried plant material, in this case Echinacea, we're going to use 5 milliliters of alcohol. What that means to calculate this out for yourself is that for every gram of dried plant material that you're going to use, in this case we're using Echinacea, you're going to want to do 5 milliliters of alcohol. If you're using fresh plant material, it's a little different. So for every gram of fresh leaves, you'll use 2 milliliters of alcohol. So that'll give you a good idea to figure out how much you want to do. So I'm going to be doing 20 grams, which is equivalent to 100 milliliters of the alcohol, which vodka is what I'm using. So just a good principle, know that for every gram of dried plant material, you're going to use 5 milliliters of your alcohol. So that is something you just want to kind of have ingrained in your mind. Right now I have my pestle and mortar, and we are just going to grind this up a little bit. It's also really important to make sure that your leaves are clean. So what I do is when I harvest my Echinacea, I actually will run it through the sink, make sure I get off any dirt, debris, little cobwebs, which is usually what I find on mine, and then I lay it out to dry. That way when it comes to this process, I've got clean leaves and I can just immediately use them. All right, so now that I have kind of ground up my Echinacea leaf, you want to pour it in your vessel, which ideally should be a glass jar. So I'm just gonna throw that in there. All right. And the idea is to pour your alcohol afterwards to make sure that it is covering it really well. What I'm doing right here. Make sure you have a really tight lid on it. Screw it on well. Let's give it a little shake. All right. Isn't she beautiful? So now you're just gonna wait, right? This is pretty much with all things herbal medicine. You create your little tincture concoction and then you have to let it infuse and draw out all the properties of the herb that you are using. So you want to store it right now in a cool, dark place. I like to do my pantry. There's really no light there, and you're gonna let it sit anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. The longer it sits, the better it's gonna be. But again, you know, if you're noticing around 4 weeks you really need this, go ahead and pull it. I just go through and I shake it, all my tinctures every day, at least every other day. So I like to keep it in a place where I'm often walking by and it's easy to remember to go and give it a shake. But after that 4 to 6 weeks is up, then you can start the straining process. You're going to get a colander, a strainer. You're going to strain out all those echinacea leaves and you're going to bottle it up, and ideally an amber dropper bottle, and this is what you will store it long term in. So it's important to make sure when you get to the bottling process, you've got some sort of label on there to identify and know what it is, and then do your research, talk to whomever you feel comfortable talking to figure out dosages for the people in your family that you plan on using it for. But this is a DIY echinacea leaf tincture, all for immune boosting, support, respiratory support. Great to have in your tool belt when it comes to cold and flu season, anti-inflammatory. So many great things packed in this little leaf. So I hope this fun, quick, easy DIY recipe encouraged you to try your hand at it. If you do, let me know. Leave it in the comments below. But thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I'll talk to you soon.